The world of the NFL is so much more than glamour and extravagance. In a shocking twist, some of its wealthiest athletes live with a modesty that defies belief. Christian Wilkins, for instance, spent a recent spring working as a substitute teacher in Oconee County schools. We're talking about men like Christian Wilkins, who banks a first-round salary but still flies on bargain airlines, and Rob Gronkowski, who amassed a staggering $70 million from his contracts and refused to touch any of it. Gronkowski's discipline was absolute. He never spent 1 cent of his NFL earnings. These are the titans of the NFL who had the power to own the world but instead chose a life of deliberate simplicity. Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins stands as one of those truly astonishing NFL players whose personal life is a complete contradiction to his financial statement. In black and white, Wilkins is an incredibly wealthy football professional, a top draft selection who has commanded millions upon millions in NFL contracts. But witnessing his day-to-day existence, you would never have a clue. Long before the fortune was ever a reality, Wilkins made a solemn promise to himself that no amount of money would ever corrupt the man he was. That conviction was forged in his youth. Growing up in Springfield, Massachusetts, he was the youngest of 8 children in a family that knew financial struggle intimately. Resources were always scarce, a harsh reality that ingrained in him a profound respect for the value of every single dollar. Even after rising to stardom as a defensive tackle at Clemson, Wilkins staunchly rejected the glittering lifestyle that so many college athletes chase. He wasn't driven by spending, he was obsessed with saving. While his peers were out on the town, Wilkins engineered a life of extreme thrift, maximizing his time at the football facility to take advantage of free meals and keep his own utility costs down. His commitment to frugality became the stuff of legend. His teammates would tell stories of how Wilkins at restaurants would craft his own lemonade from water sugar packets and lemon wedges just to avoid paying for a drink. His wardrobe consisted almost entirely of complimentary Clemson apparel. He shunned new clothes and he rode a bicycle to his classes instead of driving a car. During his senior year at Clemson, he took a job as a substitute teacher, bringing home $80 a day, every cent of which he saved. By the time he was ready for the NFL, through sheer discipline alone, Wilkins had already built a nest egg of roughly $15,000. And when Wilkins was chosen in the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft and his income exploded into the millions, absolutely nothing about him changed. Even while earning nearly $4 million a season at the start of his career, and later securing a 5th-year option worth over $10 million, Wilkins maintained what he termed a low-maintenance life. You won't find him amassing a collection of luxury vehicles. He doesn't own sprawling mansions, and he has no interest in high-end fashion. He's even been seen boarding budget airlines like Frontier, prioritizing savings far above luxury. Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski is perhaps the most stunning case of an immensely wealthy NFL icon who lived as if he had nothing. From the outside, Gronk seemed like the last person on earth who would be prudent with his finances. He cultivated a massive, larger-than-life persona as a superstar who loved to party a force of nature at tight, and hauling in touchdowns from Tom Brady and hoisting Super Bowl trophies for the New England Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Across his 11-year NFL journey, Gronkowski's contracts alone paid him more than $70 million. And yet, in the face of that colossal income, he has stated time and again that he never used a single penny of his NFL paychecks. Instead, Gronk made a calculated decision at the dawn of his career he would live exclusively on the money from his endorsements and marketing deals, sending every single game check directly into his savings. This entire strategy was born from a need for security. As a second-round pick, Gronk understood that football careers were fragile. The threat of injury, of being cut, of a career ending in an instant is a constant reality in the NFL, especially for a player in a brutal position like tight end. In those early years, Gronk shared an apartment with a roommate, drove unremarkable cars, and resisted any temptation to inflate his lifestyle just because his bank account was growing. The first car and home he ever paid for were funded by a $50,000 bonus from his agent, not from his team's salary. Even as his fame skyrocketed and his contracts swelled, his spending remained grounded. Gronk has openly said he will wear the same pair of jeans or shoes until they literally fall apart, valuing comfort over the allure of designer labels. While his contemporaries were buying up lavish estates and fleets of exotic cars, Gronk's entire focus was on minimizing his overhead. This discipline was never about denying himself. It was about securing his freedom. Gronk was determined to ensure that if his career vanished overnight, his future would already be guaranteed for the rest of his life. Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins provides one of the most stark illustrations of an incredibly affluent NFL player whose life bears no resemblance to his superstar status. By any measure, Cousins is one of the most handsomely compensated quarterbacks the league has ever seen. Throughout his time in the NFL, he has accumulated a fortune in the hundreds of millions, including a landmark, fully guaranteed $84 million agreement with the Minnesota Vikings and an even more monumental $180 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. But in spite of this breathtaking wealth, Cousins' way of life has always been more aligned with a sensible middle-class professional than that of a celebrated sports icon. Kirk Cousins' shocking relationship with money began the moment he stepped into the NFL. Selected in the 4th round in 2012, he was haunted by a single terrifying thought: the wealth could vanish in an instant. While his peers paraded in supercars, Cousins became a legend for driving a battered GMC Savannah passenger van, a hand-me-down from his grandmother that cost him a mere $5,000. That dented van was more than a vehicle. It was a declaration. It screamed practicality, it promised reliability, and it was utterly defiant of the flashy world he now inhabited. But his car was nothing compared to the bombshell of his living arrangements. During the off-seasons, this millionaire quarterback and his wife made a stunning choice. They moved into his parents' basement in Michigan. And when they weren't there, they took up residence in the basement of his wife's parents' home down in Georgia. This was never a story of poverty. It was a calculated war against a single enemy: pointless spending. He admitted it without shame. Living there was free. It was the only logical move as they meticulously plotted their future dollar by dollar. Cousins lived by a simple, brutal financial code: never burn money on things that die, the luxury cars, the yachts, the glittering toys that turn to dust. His focus was on one thing and one thing only: acquiring assets that would grow, that would outlive his career. It was only when their financial foundation was an unshakable fortress that Cousins and his wife finally allowed themselves to purchase a lakefront property and build the home of their dreams. Jordy Nelson. Here was a man who became obscenely wealthy, yet whose life seemed trapped in amber, completely untouched by the millions he earned on the gridiron. The contracts tell one story: a staggering $56 million earned during his 11-year NFL career, a Super Bowl champion with the Green Bay Packers, a name synonymous with unwavering reliability. But strip away the jersey and you wouldn't find a millionaire athlete. You would find a Kansas farmer through and through. Nelson's soul wasn't forged in the bright lights of the NFL. It was forged in the soil of Riley County, Kansas, on a family farm where relentless work was the only law, and every dollar was treated with a profound, almost sacred respect. That brutal, honest upbringing clung to him a second skin that never shed, not even when he became an All-American at Kansas State or a second-round NFL draft pick in 2008. The paychecks exploded, but Jordy Nelson refused to change. The man he was remained the man he would always be. While his teammates chased the sun on lavish vacations, Nelson returned home to a different reality: 12-hour days of grueling labor on his family's farm. You could find him behind the wheel of a combine, wrestling with crops from planting to harvest and managing a sprawling cattle operation thousands of animals strong. With millions in the bank, he made a shocking admission: he identified more as a farmer than a football star. He didn't pour his fortune into mansions. He poured it back into the earth, into farmland, equipment, and the very soul of the life he truly loved. But his unbelievable thriftiness wasn't just an off-season quirk. It followed him into the season. Nelson once confessed to a level of cheapness that stunned everyone, admitting that on road trips he would forgo dinner entirely just to save his per diem money. As the rest of the team dined out, Nelson would stay behind in his hotel room, wait for team snacks, and quietly pocket the cash. For him, saving money was as natural as breathing. Even when it came to his own land, he refused to outsource work just because he could afford an army of workers. His own father joked that even though Jordy was drowning in money, he would deliberately buy property filled with broken equipment and overgrown trees with the full intention of fixing it all with his own 2 hands. Hiring help wasn't his instinct. Doing the work was. Then there was Glover Quinn. Glover Quinn was another titan of the sport whose life was a complete contradiction to his bank account. The contracts were staggering: tens of millions of dollars over a decade-long reign, with the Houston Texans and Detroit Lions making him one of the league's most formidable safeties. But if you saw him off the field, you would never ever guess that this man was a multimillionaire. He was forged in Summit, Mississippi, a place where excess was a foreign language, and that gritty perspective became his armor in the NFL. The moment he entered the league in 2009, Quinn made a vow that would define his destiny. He would live as if every dollar could be his last. Instead of letting his lifestyle inflate with each new contract, he chained himself to a brutally simple rule: the 30-70 plan. Quinn and his family would survive on just 30% of his income, while the other 70% was locked away, saved, and invested. The evidence of this ironclad discipline was everywhere. While teammates bled cash on supercars, diamonds, and sprawling mansions, Quinn kept driving the same Yukon Denali he had purchased as a rookie. Even after inking a monumental 5-year, $23.5 million deal with Detroit, he felt no desire to replace it. To many, he looked cheap. To him, he was simply playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. For the first several years of his career, Quinn lived on approximately $6,000 a month, an almost invisible fraction of what he was earning. The rest was funneled into his future. Armed with a business education and the guidance of a financial advisor, Quinn put his fortune into blue-chip public companies before expanding into the world of private business. He attacked investing with the same relentless ferocity he brought to the football field, dissecting every move and planning years ahead, refusing to chase the siren song of a quick reward. And the results of that discipline were staggering. By the time a player like that retires in his early 30s, their investments can be on track to eclipse their entire career earnings. A perfect example of this is Ryan Carrion. Ryan Carrion stands as a paradox in the world of professional sports, a man of immense wealth whose everyday life was a universe away from the colossal contracts he signed. Look at his resume and you'll see a superstar, a first-round draft pick, the bedrock of Washington's defense, and relentlessly one of the most dominant pass rushers of his generation. Across a decorated 11-year NFL career, he amassed a fortune in the tens of millions, punctuated by a jaw-dropping 5-year, $57.5 million extension in 2015. Yet, if you were to witness how Carrion conducted his life at the peak of his powers, you would never believe you were looking at one of the highest-paid defensive titans in the entire league. The truth is, Carrion's philosophy on money was forged long before the first NFL paycheck ever landed in his bank account. Coming up in Indiana, he was immersed in a salt-of-the-earth, no-nonsense world where sweat and effort were valued far more than shallow appearances. That very ethos propelled him to become an All-American at Purdue, and it clung to him unshakable even when he stepped onto the grand stage of the NFL. From the second he was drafted in 2011, Carrion made a deliberate, unwavering choice to live a life far more modest than his income would suggest. Where most athletes would rush to elevate their lifestyle after that first life-changing contract, Carrion took the path less traveled. He did the exact opposite. Even with that staggering contract extension secured, he opted not for a sprawling mansion, but for a humble apartment shared with a friend he'd known since childhood. His choice of vehicle was just as revealing. Carrion became legendary for driving a battered old van he'd purchased from his own grandmother. As his fortune grew, he remained loyal to the simple vehicles he'd bought early on, completely ignoring the temptation of luxury automobiles while his teammates arrived in a parade of Bentleys and Lamborghinis. Carrion would just pull up silently in something so practical it was almost invisible. This disciplined mindset even extended to what was on his plate. Forget the endless nights at five-star restaurants or the expense of a personal chef. Carrion was in his own kitchen cooking the majority of his meals. And on the rare occasion he indulged, it was shockingly simple. His idea of a celebratory feast was often rumored to be Chipotle. Next up, Darrius Heyward-Bey. Darrius Heyward-Bey is another shocking case study in fiscal restraint, a player whose off-field life bore no resemblance to his high-profile draft status or his massive career earnings. On paper, he was the total package. An elite prospect, the 7th overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft, snatched up by the Oakland Raiders, a man who would go on to earn tens of millions of dollars. But step away from the stadium lights and his world was profoundly different from the glittering existence of a typical top-tier draft pick. Long before the millions started rolling in, Heyward-Bey had witnessed firsthand the terrifying speed at which wealth could vanish, and he architected his entire life to prevent that nightmare from ever becoming his reality. His financial philosophy was born from his roots, from his very upbringing. He wasn't raised in a world of abundance, and the stark absence of a safety net instilled in him a powerful discipline from a young age. But the most profound force shaping his financial discipline was his own mother, Vivian, a certified accountant. From the instant he set foot in the NFL, she became the guardian of his fortune, the central figure in managing every single dollar. Instead of a blank check to his own vast wealth, Heyward-Bey subjected himself to a disciplined, strict allowance. Every single transaction was meticulously tracked, and he received constant financial updates, ensuring he was never in the dark about the flow of his own money. While his peers were celebrating their first massive contracts with a storm of luxury cars, blinding jewelry, and sprawling estates, Heyward-Bey moved in the complete opposite direction. He purposefully kept his existence stripped down and simple, sidestepping gaudy purchases, rarely wasting money on non-essentials, and choosing a life of comfort over a life of ostentatious display. One story perfectly encapsulates his incredible thriftiness: his decision to cut off his cable television subscription during the football season simply because he knew he wouldn't be home enough to watch it. For nearly any other millionaire, it would be a rounding error, an expense so small it wouldn't even register. But to Heyward-Bey, it was a leak in the ship, a pointless waste. Despite accumulating an estimated $35 million throughout his career, he remained steadfastly committed to living on a fraction of his income. He once called himself not really a flashy guy, confessing that he frequently had to deny his own desires even for things he could effortlessly afford. And then there was Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson is perhaps the most legendary example of an unimaginably wealthy NFL star, who made the conscious, shocking choice to live as if he had nothing. By all accounts, Johnson was the very blueprint for a superstar wide receiver. A six-time Pro Bowler, one of the most prolific pass catchers of the 2000s, a man who banked nearly $49 million over his 11-year reign in the NFL. With that level of fame and a fortune that vast, the world expected a life of pure opulence, of sprawling mansions, exotic supercars, and an endless river of luxury. But Okutsinko, he defied every single expectation. From his earliest days with the Cincinnati Bengals, Johnson completely renounced the lavish spending culture that so often ensnares young, newly rich professional athletes. He didn't rent an apartment, and he didn't buy a house. For his first 2 years in the league, he literally took up residence inside the Bengals stadium. The facility was his paradise. It had showers, a never-ending supply of food from the cafeteria, a place to sleep, televisions, and even video game consoles. In his brutally logical mind, paying for rent was utterly absurd. And even when he finally moved out of the stadium, he didn't rush to a mansion. Instead, for years, he simply lived with members of his family. But his extreme thriftiness went far beyond just where he lived. While his peers dripped in diamonds and flaunted luxury timepieces, Johnson harbored a shocking secret. Every piece of jewelry he wore was a complete counterfeit. His source for these glittering imposters: mall staples like Claire's, where he'd pick up cubic zirconia, convinced that under the glare of stadium lights, nobody would ever know the truth. And his wardrobe told the exact same tale. He deliberately chose budget-friendly labels, rocked convincing replicas instead of high-end designer kicks, and utterly rejected the pressure to project an image of immense wealth. This deep-seated poverty mindset bled into every corner of his life, from how he traveled to what he ate. With a fortune that could easily afford private jets, Johnson was a frequent flyer on ultra-budget carriers like Spirit, his only condition being an exit row seat. And when dining out, forget five-star restaurants. His go-to was fast food, particularly McDonald's, a taste forged in his childhood that money could never change. His philosophy was simple: a bigger price tag didn't equate to a richer life. And by living so far beneath his means, he claimed to have banked over 80% of his career earnings. Then there's Marshawn Lynch, an NFL icon whose daily life is a staggering contradiction to his colossal net worth. By every metric, Lynch is a man of incredible wealth, a former NFL Titan, a Super Bowl victor, a perennial Pro Bowler, and undeniably one of the most legendary figures of his generation. Across a 12-year reign in the NFL, his contracts alone funneled nearly $50 million into his pockets, not even counting endorsements. Yet, for all that staggering income, those in his inner circle have consistently whispered the same unbelievable truth. Marshawn Lynch lives as if he doesn't have a penny to his name. Raised on the tough streets of Oakland, California, he witnessed a painful reality. Fortunes vanished in an instant, and gifted athletes were tragically reduced to financial ruin once the cheering stopped. So upon entering the league, he made a silent revolutionary vow: he would never spend a single cent of his football salary. Rather than funding his life with his game day earnings, Lynch made the extraordinary choice to bank every last dollar from his NFL contracts and survive solely on his endorsement income. That financial blueprint on its own places him in a league of his own. Where most athletes view endorsement deals as icing on the cake, Lynch completely inverted the financial pyramid. His partnerships with giants like Skittles, Nike, Pepsi, and Microsoft were strictly for covering his living costs, while his massive NFL paychecks were funneled directly into savings and investments. The stunning outcome: by his retirement, it was widely reported he had amassed a fortune exceeding $40 million from football alone. Even with this immense wealth, Lynch's daily habits were legendarily thrifty. His friends and family have openly teased him about his relentless hunt for a bargain when dining out, how he recoils at inflated prices and instinctively picks the cheapest dish available. His own cousin, the rapper Mista Fab, painted a picture of a man who would agonize over trivial sums, even getting caught up in a debate over whether an item was $10 or $15. This aversion to spending extended to the typical symbols of athletic success: flashy cars and extravagant possessions. Throughout his career, he was known for driving surprisingly humble vehicles, from well-worn older models to astonishingly a Toyota Prius. He once even quipped about driving the Prius for Uber when he got bored. But instead of squandering his fortune, Lynch was quietly building an empire. After retirement, he became a co-owner of the Seattle Kraken. He poured his capital into multiple sports franchises, ignited new business ventures, and methodically constructed a legacy of generational wealth that would long outlive his time on the field. He frequently delivers raw, unfiltered advice to younger players, telling them to take care of y'all's chicken and to stop chasing the approval of people who will vanish the moment the money is gone. Ryan Broyles. Ryan Broyles represents another breed of NFL player one whose staggering wealth is enough to boggle the mind, yet whose life remains astonishingly down to earth. On paper, Broyles was the complete package, a monumentally wealthy professional football player, a record-shattering wide receiver from the University of Oklahoma, and a coveted second-round pick for the Detroit Lions in 2012. Throughout his career, Broyles secured contracts worth over $3.6 million, with more than $1.4 million of that absolutely guaranteed. Yet witnessing his daily existence, you would be utterly clueless about his fortune. Long before the millions started pouring in, Broyles had already made a life-altering choice. The money he earned in the NFL was destined for one purpose: to build a secure future, not to fuel a lavish present. His upbringing in Norman, Oklahoma, instilled in him the power of foresight. But it was a pivotal meeting with a financial advisor during his rookie year that delivered the wisdom that would shape his entire destiny. The guidance he received was deceptively simple, yet utterly transformative. Calculate your essential monthly expenses, lock in a strict budget, and channel every remaining dollar into investments. Broyles embraced this philosophy with unwavering discipline. He and his wife, Mary Beth, committed to an ironclad annual budget of just $60,000 to cover everything from their mortgage to their groceries. Every other stream of income, from his colossal NFL paychecks to his endorsement deals, was immediately diverted into a portfolio of investments, retirement funds, and property, forging a fortress of financial security for life after the game. And even as the millions rolled in, Broyles' daily life was a masterclass in modesty. He continued to drive the same 2005 Chevrolet Trailblazer he'd had since college and a Mazda 3, while his wife drove a Cadillac SRX. When they had to move, he personally drove the U-Haul, saving thousands of dollars in moving fees. Their entertainment budget was just as disciplined. The couple cut the cord on cable, relying instead on Apple TV and Netflix, and dining out was a rare, meticulously planned treat, not a casual expense. Even their getaways were executed with a hawk-like focus on frugality, leveraging coupons and deal sites like Groupon to squeeze every ounce of value from their spending. His home in Dallas, Texas was a testament to his unshakable mindset, purposeful, efficient, and a world away from the expected glamour. He plunged himself into the universe of finance, becoming a ravenous student of wealth, absorbing wisdom from mentors who had already conquered the game and masterfully exploiting every financial weapon at his disposal, like the NFL's 401k match program. And that very discipline became his salvation when the inevitable happened: an injury that violently slammed the door on his NFL dreams. He pivoted almost without a pause into the world of real estate development, unleashing the financial empire he had so carefully constructed during his time on the field. Now Broyles' empire continues to expand, granting him the ultimate freedom to devote his life to his family, his ventures, and his legacy, completely liberated from the crushing weight of financial fear. What does his incredible journey stir in you? Unleash your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to NFL Rivals, because you won't want to miss the shocking stories we have coming next.